Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. This is an explanation of Season 1, Episode 2 of Game of Thrones, The King's Road, in the light of all we now know. Obviously, if you haven't caught up to the show at the end of Season 6, then be wary of spoilers. While Episode 2 may not have the obvious foreshadowing moments of Episode 1 or the momentous events of later in the season, what it does very well is set up the character arcs that will develop over the next 6 seasons. Khal Drogo sets his Khalasar off eastwards, away from Westeros and into the Dothraki Sea. The delay in the promised invasion frustrates Viserys, so he tags along, clearly unaware or uncaring of the change in Daenerys' status in the eyes of the Dothraki. She is now Khaleesi, wife of the most powerful Khal in the land, a role she is starting to embrace. She learns the language and ways of bringing Drogo pleasure in bed. Fundamentally, this is her taking control of her own life. She is no longer content to be just a plaything or a bargaining chip, and we will see this growth in self-identity continue throughout Season 1. Back in Winterfell, we see the first signs of strain in several relationships that will play out much later in the series. Bran lies unconscious but not dead after his fall. Joffrey decides not to pay respects, and Tyrion slaps him for it. This slight is not forgotten by Joffrey, and will have big impacts both later in this episode and in future seasons. Meanwhile, Jon gives Arya a needle, her very own sword. At the time, it probably represented to her freedom from the roles society demanded for her. But over time, it would change into her symbolic clinging on to her identity as a Stark, despite all the alter egos she assumed and her training to become no one. It is the one thing from her former life that she hid from the faceless men, unwilling to sacrifice that last link to Winterfell, Jon and her family. After a series of heartfelt goodbyes, Ned, Sansa and Arya join the King's retinue in heading back to King's Landing, although Jon and Tyrion headed north instead with Benjen, Jon to join the Night's Watch and Tyrion to see the Wall. When Jon and Ned part ways, Ned promises that next time they meet he will tell Jon about his mother. The unasked question at the time was, why then? Why, when Ned had refused to tell anyone about Jon's mother for 16 years, was he willing to do so once Jon was at the Wall? The answer, with hindsight, is clear. It is because then Jon would be safe. Members of the Watch disavow all claims to titles or powers, so he would no longer be a threat to the king. Like Maester Aemon had escaped Robert's murderous assault on all Targaryens because he was a member of the Night's Watch, so Jon would be safe, and the world could finally know about his true parentage. Of course, Ned never got the chance to tell Jon, and the world carried on under the misapprehension that he was indeed Ned's bastard son. Soon after the party has left, 2 important things happen in Winterfell. First, an assassin tries to kill Bran in his bed. He is foiled by a combination of Catelyn and Samma. In the show, who ordered this assassination attempt is one of the great unanswered mysteries. In the next episode, Littlefinger suggests to Catelyn that it must have been Tyrion, but this is just another one of his lies to try and set the Starks and Lannisters against each other. In the books, it is heavily hinted that it was Joffrey who ordered the assassination. Littlefinger had lost the dagger in a bet with King Robert, and the dagger had been among the king's possessions that travelled north to Winterfell. Joffrey found it and gave it to a cat's paw assassin that had attached himself to the king's retinue heading north, and his motive? Well, we can assume that he was angry at having been ordered to pay respects over what happened, but to order the assassination of an unconscious child? Well, we are left to assume that it is simple cruelty. The first signs of Joffrey's psychotic temperament. The other thing that happens in Winterfell is that Catelyn finds a blonde hair in the tower that Bran fell from. She becomes convinced that Bran must have been pushed from the tower because he witnessed something the Lannisters didn't want him to see. This is a sound deduction by Catelyn, but perhaps not one she would have made had her sister not already sowed the seeds of distrust of the Lannisters with her message blaming them for Jon Arryn's death. Regardless, she decides to follow Ned to King's Landing to tell him of the latest development. At this point, we cut to the King's party, heading south down the King's Road, and we have one of those moments in Game of Thrones that, while not exactly foreshadowing, shines a light on how this group of disparate characters interact, and how that can so easily escalate with tragic consequences. Arya, true to herself, has befriended the baker's boy, uncaring of their difference in social status. Joffrey, true to himself, interrupts, showing off to Sansa by bullying the baker's boy. Arya, of course, defends her friend. Nymeria, her direwolf, defends Arya, and Joffrey gets hurt in the fracas. Arya, realizing that Joffrey will demand retribution, sends Nymeria away. Cersei, vindictive as ever, demands revenge for the damage to her son. Robert abdicates himself from responsibility, and Ned ends up being forced to kill Lady, Sansa's direwolf, because Nymeria can't be found. This incident, though it seems quite minor in the light of the rest of the series, sets us up for all that is to come. Joffrey will be needlessly cruel, Sansa unwilling to stand up to him. Arya will look after herself and those she loves, regardless of who opposes her. Ned will do what he thinks is the right thing, regardless of the personal cost. Cersei will show no compassion, and Robert will shy away from making the kind of tough decision a ruler needs to make. Between them, these characters will shape what is to come in King's Landing, and this incident should have given us more than a hint of what will happen. It's also the last we see of Nymeria. In the books, she reappears several times in Arya's dreams, and the bond between them is very apparent. I have a sneaking suspicion we may yet see Arya and Nymeria reunited in the show. Finally, we have the first hint that there is something mystical about the link between the Starks and their direwolves, and in particular that Bran may have dormant powers. He awakes the very moment that Ned kills Lady, Sansa's direwolf, a look of shock and pain on his face. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you want to see more like this one, please click on the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in other ways, please check out my Patreon page. Thanks again. That's all for this time. I'll see you again real soon.